So let's rewind nearly 100 years ago to the 1920s when IBM invented the punch card machine. This was an exciting development in the advancement of modern hardware, but it posed unique challenges that catalyzed the potential for software later on. In particular, it posed two specific challenges. One, when a company used a punch card machine, it would typically fill a massive room. So that limited the company's ability to grow, and for the technology to grow with the company's growth. And the second problem was that, although this great piece of hardware could calculate really standard and monotonous accounting formulas, it gave no insights into predictability. Things like demand, things like cost, things like revenue. So these challenges ultimately opened up for software to create a massive opportunity. So let's circle back to the 1960s. Now, manufacturing in this era was huge. It was a large part of the United States GDP, and clearly, with the help of software, more important things could be done. So this ultimately gave rise to the Material Resource Planning System, the MRP system. And this was really the first of the enterprise software industry in North America. It was so popular that by the 1980s, over 8,000 United States companies were using it. But this was actually a competitive advantage for one particular segment of the market. For big companies, they were at a distinctive advantage because they had the resources to build software in-house. Nobody was purchasing it, there was no sales funnel, and it was strictly built by the professionals that they hired. But things started to change during the rise of the modern consumer web browser, Netscape. So let's go to the 1990s. Netscape opened up a whole industry in enterprise software by allowing application service providers. These were small vendors that solved unique problems with software. Now, how did they sell? Well, they sold through a lock-in contract. Application service providers provided a license to companies so that way they could predict their revenue per year. It was almost like an annuity. However, there were some distinct challenges with this. What if a company grew beyond the application? What if they needed more applications, but they were tied to this contract? Well, ultimately, it was Salesforce.com that capitalized on this opportunity by revolutioning the enterprise software industry with the dawn of the software as a service.
So as Chris mentioned, SaaS is a huge shift in the industry that's changing the way that salespeople have to approach their jobs. Software as a service consists of a pay-per-use model where companies pay only for the services they use, and all applications are hosted in the cloud by the vendor. This has some obvious advantages for companies, including scalability, ease of upgrading, as well as enhanced security. But what SaaS has really led to is a rise of a number of different hybrid models that lie between the traditional licensing model and the full service model. This has put a downward pressure on price for the traditional vendors, and subscription revenue is rapidly increasing, expecting to overtake about a quarter of all industry revenues by 2016. So with this obviously comes a challenge for salespeople, heavy discounting, and more difficulty in communicating the value of their traditional enterprise software. Another main force in the industry is the rise of the information age and the internet. Because of this, obviously we have much more informed buyers. They are now working in cross-functional teams to close deals due to the wide complexity of the software solutions available and the fact that it needs to be implemented across the organization. With this also comes some geographical distribution of buyers. So although you may be dealing with a purchasing manager in New York, you could also be communicating with tech support in India or customer service in China, which obviously complicates things for salespeople. Another big part about buyers here is their preconceived notions of the industry and what it should be. Obviously, many buyers expect that software should actually be totally free. And as a salesperson, part of your job is going in to challenge these preconceived notions and show the value of your solution and why it should be something that the company invests in. And finally, another main trend in the industry is consolidation. We've seen a number of mergers and acquisitions from the biggest firms to the smallest firms, which really means that now these companies are selling a range of solutions. It's not just for one specific business function, but it might do many different things. Again, this adds complexity and extremely complicates the salesperson's job.
As mentioned by Tyler, there are several forces that are changing the world of sales as we know it. So what we did is we reached out to Sean Burns at LinkedIn, who's a relationship manager. LinkedIn is a current global leader in business networking today. So what he said is buyers have transparency. They're able to research your solution and learn everything about it as well. But it goes the other way as well. As a sales individual, it's your responsibility to use all the social platforms to learn about who your buyer is, what they're doing, and what their buying process is to actually make the purchase of the enterprise solution. So what this leads to is the challenger sales technique. So what the challenger sales technique does is it really challenges those preconceived notions that the buyers have in their minds and really provides them new thoughts of how they can strategically grow their business and really provide that data that they can't counter and that they can understand. This will build credibility for yourself and legitimacy of the solution you are presenting to them. So what you're really doing is managing and educating the customer to make sure they understand how they can grow their business in the forward, not just on a short-term basis. After talking to numerous professionals in the industry, we were able to narrow it down to 3 best practices. So the first one is strong cross-functional teams. This is fundamental and vital to any sales professional in this industry because it's not as simple as simply making the sale. You want to make sure you're working with your engineers, your operations, and your customer service teams to make sure that the customer has a consistent experience throughout the entire process. Secondly, social selling and human to human. This might seem very, very simple, but at the end of the day, it is human to human. You really want to talk to buyers as a person and really want to understand what keeps them up at night and how we're going to make their lives a little bit better. And lastly, after talking to Ali Razakos from Salesforce.com, she really mentioned that it's important to have a customer-centric approach and to really focus on C-suite executives. Nowadays, solutions are really consolidating and they focus on the entire business process automation and not one functionality. C-suite executives have that vision into a long-term strategic view and can really make that happen.
So with respect to the trends we identified earlier, we have 2 pieces of advice for executives competing in this industry. The first is to really focus on the success of your customer. We talked a lot about challenge selling, and in prioritizing the success of your customer when they implement your system over making the sale, you are subconsciously challenging their business to be better and helping them realize the benefits of your solution. Following that, it's really important that sales executives identify and track the correct metrics when evaluating the performance of their company. It's very easy to gravitate towards simple things such as profit, loss, and number of accounts sold, but what they really need to focus on are things such as attrition rates and adoption rates to really let them see where in the funnel they're losing customers and allow them to push forward in developing their business. As a new graduate pursuing a career in sales in the SaaS industry, we have 2 pieces of advice for you. The first is to really build your own brand. So create your own content online, update your professional profiles, and join professional groups to stay up to date on the industry trends. We've come a long way since the IBM punch cards of 1928. And now that we are implementing cross-functional solutions, it's very important to understand the unique criteria of each decision maker within one organization's decision-making unit.